You're listening to the Drummer Daily Podcast, the only daily podcast dedicated just to drummers. Go to my website at danielhadaway.com. Hey, back again for the first time. That's not true, but I think, is that the name of a Ludacris album? I think it is. I could be making that up. We're back again, not for the first time, unless you just joined me for the first time, and in that case it is. We are back for the first time, or we're here for the first time for you. So today I thought, and I realized in recording these that these podcasts are slowly creeping up to being more like 10-minute podcasts. My original intention was for them to be about 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes each, but all of a sudden now we are rapidly and frequently crossing the 9 or 10 minute mark. So I'm going to try to keep these shorter for my own sanity. And also I got to save some good stuff for the next time. I can't give it all to you in every episode. I gotta keep you wanting more awesome content. So, but today I want to talk to you about studio drumming. And if you've never recorded in a studio in actually a professional setting, I want to give you a few things to, this is probably going to be titled like questions to ask before a studio session, but I don't necessarily think that it's questions you should ask. It might be more like things to consider or information you need to know, because I'm going to give you three kind of overall general questions that you need to know the answer to, but I don't want, it would be really bad if you were talking to a producer or whatever and you just had a list of questions for him. That might not actually look that great. It might look like you don't know what you're doing in a bad way. And so I don't want you to feel that like you're being annoying or you're over asking. So this is stuff you might have to find unique ways of acquiring the information, like maybe asking another musician who's going to be there if you know them, or in conversation kind of randomly kind of get there. Just don't say, hey, I have all these questions for you, and just ask a bunch of questions. Be a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Tactful in how you find this information out. But here are three questions you need to know. First one, three questions you should ask before a studio session. I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but question number one is, whatever time you've been given to be there, is that a setup time or is that a downbeat time? So a setup time would be asking basically, hey, the time you told me to be there at 10 a.m., does that mean that you want me to get there at 10 a.m. and then we'll start setting up everything at 10 a.m. and then we'll get drum sounds and then we'll listen to the song and then we'll start tracking, because if that's the case, you'll get there at 10 a.m. but you probably won't even start till lunchtime on the actual tracking. Or is it a downbeat time, which means we want to be tracking the first take of the song at 10 a.m. And that means you would need to get there much earlier, of course assuming that the studio is open that early, but you want to get there much earlier to get all that stuff set up before that downbeat time of 10 a.m. So that's something you need to know before the day arrives. And I guess the big thing with all of these questions is you want to make sure that you are matching up what you come prepared for and what you do, that you are matching up with the producer's expectations, or the artist, or whoever's kind of running things, most likely a producer, but you want to make sure you're matching their expectations and are ready. Along those lines, the second thing is you need to know what gear you need to bring. And that question I will ask directly sometimes, like especially if it's a studio that I haven't been to before and I don't know what they have. I'll be like, hey, do they have a drum kit? Do they have cymbal stands? What kind of gear do they have? And most producers will know that, or they'll need to know that anyway, so they don't mind giving you that info. They might say, hey, call the studio and ask, which is fine, but either way, you can say, call up the studio and say, hey, I'm tracking in room B next week, and I just want to make sure that I bring the right gear, and what do you guys have there? And you can even say, like so you're not like, they don't think you're some burglar trying to come steal stuff from them. You could even say like, hey, my name's so-and-so, I'm playing drums in room B next week with such and such, who's the producer. And so I just wanted to call in. I've never been to that studio before. I want to see what you guys have that, gear-wise, so I can figure out what I need to bring. Talk to somebody that way. That might be a good way to do it. Either way, whatever answer you get back from them, what I would say back to them, especially if it's the producer talking to you, is, okay, you guys have this stuff, so that means I need to bring X, and you list off what you need to bring. So that way you've established what they have and also what you're going to bring. And that will help all of you get a clear picture of what's going to be there, so that you don't get there and get surprised and be like, oh man, no one has a hi-hat stand. And we kind of need that for a drum session. Things like that can happen, and things like that still do happen sometimes. But it'd be better to, in your own mind, think, man, you don't have any regrets. You don't think, man, I should have asked this question or should have asked that question. You kind of know ahead of time. And the last thing you might want to know ahead of time is asking, are we tracking live as a band or separately? And what that means is, depending on the type of session, in Nashville, they happen both ways, but I might go into a session and there's like a scratch vocal and guitar track that's already been recorded, and all that's left, so I come in as a drummer, and maybe me and the bass player at the same time might track those parts, our parts, along with the scratch vocal and scratch acoustic guitar, for example, that have already been laid down for reference. And so that might be the way that it goes down. Or it could be the entire band. We have drums, bass, maybe keys, one or two electric guitars and an acoustic, and everyone's tracking all at the same time. At the same time. Now, when you do something like that, a lot of times the whole band tracking at once, at least in my experience, happens more when you do demo sessions, when you have an artist who has got a good budget to maybe have a demo they want to record to pitch to a label or something like that, and you don't have much time, so everyone records at once, and it doesn't like you're not going to spend hours and hours on a guitar part. You're going to get something that gives you a really good idea of what the song is like and get it down. That also happens a lot for songwriters. If they want to demo a bunch of songs that they've written quickly, they might have the full band tracking at once scenario happening. So it kind of can depend, but I think for you it might just be helpful for you to know ahead of time to kind of know what to anticipate, how the day is going to go. Especially if you haven't done it a bunch before, it can be one less thing to be nervous about and one less unknown, which can prevent you from being nervous. And I will say this, one extra thing to kind of be mindful of is that you have to be ready for curveballs. You have to be ready to be asked to do things you may not be anticipating as far as a drummer goes, as far as things you're used to doing. And so a lot of times for me, it can be bad news if I have listened, if I have for some reason get a demo of the song before the session. It actually can be really tough for me because without even meaning to, I'll hear the demo and I'll just in my head make up a drum part that I think sounds great for that song. And I'll hear it, I might hear the song 5 or 6 times. And by the time I get to the session, I'm like, that's the drum part in my head, whether I consciously think that or subconsciously think that's the only thing that'll work for the song. And I'll sit down, we'll do a run through and I'll play that. The producer will be like, no, let's do something else. And 9 times out of 10, whatever I had in my head is not what ends up being on the song. And it can be really hard to spark your creativity after you've spent so many times listening to the song on your own, thinking a drum part's going to be one way, and then they're like, no, let's come up with something different. And my doorbell just rang. That was fun. But anyway, it can be really tough to be creative if you've had some drum part in your mind over and over again, and you think that's how it's going to be. So it might be better for your creativity if you don't hear the song much ahead of time and wait until you get there. That can be kind of counterintuitive because you think I want to be prepared for a gig or for a session, but actually it can hurt your creativity. So anyway, there's just a couple of questions, a couple of things to think about before you go into a session. I hope that helped you out, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.